Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is SockBot, and today I want to talk about my most recent game because I kind of accidentally finished it. Now, I know that sounds weird, but in all honesty, I was sitting there working on another section and suddenly realized if I place these last 2 stars in, this game is done. Now, this is super weird for me because, as some of you might know, ADD prevents me from doing most things most of the time. In other words, every game I make, that last 20% is normally done in a coffee-fueled nightmare of a personal day that I finally took from work specifically to do that last 20%, following which I refused to look at said game for at least 3 months or so. So, for my own good, as well as hopefully some of yours, I decided to take a look back and see what I did differently this time that made things go so much more smoothly. And no, I will not be ending this video or starting this video with, "I'm just more experienced now," because while experience surely helped, I honestly think that changes in technique are what made this game go so smoothly. Also, I'm still an amateur, so I can only speak from my experience personally. Regardless, if you enjoyed this sort of analysis and tips type video, please leave a like down below and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more, but no pressure as always. So this is going to be a few parts, but in this video I want to touch on balance first. And by balance, I mean balance between creating unique sculpts, using community objects, and modifying community objects as I created this level. That last section on modifying will be probably the majority of this video. But this balance will often be different for every single person, and it's not completely equal between the three, at least it's not for me, but hopefully my personal experience can provide some insight, particularly on modifying community objects, because like I said, I think that's what I spend the majority of my time doing. Now, if you've been here for any amount of time, you know that I'm a proponent of using community objects wherever possible. My skills are absolutely not in 3D sculpting, for one. I mean, Dreams is the first place I've ever 3D sculpted, so this does save a heck of a lot of time. But for two, that's just kind of how the game was intended to work. It's an ecosystem where the vast majority of community objects are never used in full games, so seriously, if you don't enjoy sculpting, well, don't waste your time on sculpting. All of these community objects are there for you to use. But obviously, you can't just smash a handful of community elements together and call it a game, and so that's why I call it a balance. To explain, when selecting community objects, I am always thinking, how can I modify this element to fit my game better? This thought process continues into building the level, and for me, it takes up the majority of my time when doing so. For example, one of my first obstacles that I ran into this time for this level was, how do I get the player up to that highway, because it was one of the set pieces that I placed first. I thought of a cannon, kind of, like Mario 64, but I figured that was a bit too on the nose of Mario 64, and obviously this level takes a lot of influence from that, so as I've made a habit of doing, I looked at all the other elements, and with Mario 64 still on my mind, because, favorite platformer and all that, I decided to add some sort of elevator. I ended up hollowing out the inside of one of my highway supports to create an elevator inside, and let me tell you, this was not the only example of modifications I made to community objects by any means. I modified the car in at least 10 different ways, at least as far as I was able to count, both sculpture-wise and logic-wise. I pulled and pushed bricks in 3 different sections of the level. I used beams from the cell tower to create entirely new supports for the platforms that were also unique, which led to the top of that cell tower. I modified the character for this level to allow him to pick up objects. I created logic and models to shrink all grabbed objects when picked up. I tore apart the dilapidated car model to animate its trunk for a platforming segment. I did the same for the dumpster. And I changed the appearance, physics, and logic of just about everything else. Basically, I made all of these little modifications to personalize the community objects to make them work for me. Now, this section is long because, like I said, it's my favorite part, but I won't lie, it can be a pain in the ass. Referencing pieces inside the red car model, for instance, required scoping in about 17 times every single time that I decided to change a different piece of the car, and in reference to the cell tower platforms, let me just tell you that slicing pieces out of a sculpt is in itself an art form. As a quick aside, if you are running into these issues, for the first one, remember that you could remove things from groups by grabbing them with R2, holding L1 and pressing circle, all at the same time, in that order. At least I think it has to be in that order. But as for modifying sculpts, my process is as follows. First, I place down a few clones to start just to have a basis. 2, I absolutely tear into one of them to figure out how its shapes were formed and to kind of get a sense on how the groups within it work. And then 3, I either cut out the section that I want if it's possible, or I'll take 2 clones and delete out opposite parts in each, e.g. for a tree, I will delete the leaves in one and the stump in the other to get separate sculpts that I can move and reference independently. But honestly, when you're going through your different sculpts that you have brought in from other people on the community, the TLDR is that every artist works differently, so this will require different sorts of finagling for different sculpts. This is just my process in terms of most of the things that I end up finding. Well, that and apparently loud motorcycles in the background is part of the process too. But finally, I want to mention the sculpts that I made from scratch. For me, this is a last resort if I can't find the object that I want, and I largely use those to fill in gaps where community objects just don't quite suffice. While I did piece together a handful of sculpts that look completely different from their original forms, for example, those giant platforms up on the cell tower, the only pieces that I created entirely from scratch were the fireballs in the dumpster section, the ribbon between the caution pylons, and the center building under the cell tower. All of these were relatively quick sculpts, but sometimes you just run into things that you don't quite know how to search for, or things that don't quite exist yet on the Dreamiverse. And while there were other parts like the platforms of the cell tower and the gate structures that I heavily modified to suit my needs, these really were the only things that I made from hitting the sculpt button and starting there. Honestly, I see this as a success story for me because honestly, while I've been playing Dreams for over a year and a few months now, I've really only picked up these techniques over the past 6 months or so, and it's completely changed my opinion on Dreams. I always respected how revolutionary this game is and how much potential it has. I mean, heck, I devoted a major portion of my channel to it, but it wasn't until I really started working in this way that I really felt like a creator in Dreams. I miss this feeling a lot since in Little Big Planet, it was a lot more everything is available to you from the start, and you can kind of mix and match and push it together in different ways that you want to create a level. And that's a sentiment that I've shared a few times on this channel, but now more than ever, I feel that same sort of excitement for what's next within Dreams. Ironic considering how hard it's been to get anything done these days with all that's going on, but here we are, I suppose. Yeah, but I hope that was an enjoyable video for you. If you enjoy learning a little bit more about my personal process, hopefully it can give you some ideas of how to work with community objects yourself and kind of strike that balance, or at least think of it while you're working through it on your different games, because I know that that's one of the weirdest things to think of, and it's not something that I really would have thought of if I didn't create a YouTube video for it, and that's one of the things that honestly has helped me is creating these videos to explain different things and go into depth, because it makes me take a good look at all of the different things I've been working on and how I've been working through them and what's worked and what hasn't. I highly recommend you do that too, and maybe I'll make a video on that at some point, but I think that seems more like an afterthought of, hey, this is why I make videos and this is how I make videos, than actually this is the process that I do to self-reflect, because that might be a little bit too deep for a sort of video like this. But regardless, thank you so much for watching. Again, like the video and subscribe if you want to see more, but no pressure as always. All above that, I hope everybody is doing well. I know it's a very difficult time right now. I know that I'm going through difficulties as well. I mean, nobody's just absolutely okay right now as far as I've been able to tell, because it's tough. But regardless, I hope you guys are doing well. I really, really mean that. If anybody is struggling, feel free to reach out. I know I'm just a small platform, but us gamers and shy people need to stick together. I say shy when I broadcast parts of my life to the internet, but hopefully you understand what I mean. Regardless, thank you so much for watching for like the 8th time in this video, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. But for now, goodbye.